It's been a few years since I ranked the James Bond actors from worst to best. You can troll back through the channel's back catalogue, but I wanted to see if my list has changed over the past few years, and I also wanted to improve on the original video, so starting with number 6 at the bottom of the ranking. Number 6. George Lazenby, the one-off 007, perhaps gets an unfair reputation. It was a ballsy move for Lazenby to essentially bluff his way into playing the biggest role in Hollywood at the time. There's so much behind-the-scenes gossip about this frankly fascinating story as to how Lazenby was cast as Bond, but for the purposes of the video, I'll just focus on his performance in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Obviously, it's worth noting that films are very rarely, if ever, shot in order of what takes place in the story. However, I always thought Lazenby's performance gets progressively better throughout the film. He's somewhat wooden and lacking in charisma in the earlier scenes, but excellent at the fight sequences. By the end of the film, Lazenby has become more comfortable in the part and seems to fit the role of Bond. With a few more films under his belt, who knows? Lazenby was certainly fortunate in that he had a superb script to work with, but Lazenby ranks bottom. He's a bit wooden to begin with, but does gradually get better. A maverick casting choice, but not a very unorthodox ranking position. Number 5. This may be rather controversial, and I must stress that after Lazenby, everything is very close, and will likely change again within a few months. The margins of places 5 through 1 are very fine indeed. Someone has to be placed in 5th, and it's Pierce Brosnan. The Bond of the 90s was given an excellent debut with GoldenEye. Everything about Brosnan's performance oozes Bond. I'd argue that Brosnan takes elements of Dalton's performance from License to Kill 2, which was perhaps a bold move at the time, considering the public's ambivalence towards the Dalton era. Brosnan is excellent in every scenario his character is thrown into. GoldenEye was essentially a modified script from when Dalton was still Bond, and was likely written with him in mind, and you can sort of tell when watching it. Tomorrow Never Dies was written with Brosnan in mind from the outset. Brosnan seemed far more comfortable in the part, not that his GoldenEye performance seemed nervous or uptight. At this stage, you may be wondering where my negative opinions of Brosnan's performance are. He's even better in The World Is Not Enough, which is quite possibly his finest turn as Bond. It's more to do with the fact that Brosnan's Bond is a jack of all trades, but ultimately a master of none. If you want intensity, you have Dalton. If you want charm, you have Moore. If you want drama, you have Craig. If you want whatever Lazenby was, well, you have that. I suppose the cynics watching this would argue that actually Connery was a bit of a jack-of-all-trades Bond too. I have never connected with Brosnan's Bond in the way that I have with some of the others, and I'm not entirely sure why. I think the balance between the frivolity and the serious elements may have meant Brosnan's performance came across at times as an uneasy compromise between the two. Number 4. The man who saved the Bond series after the tumultuous period after Connery's exit, Lazenby's bizarre hiring, and Connery's brief return, Roger Moore takes the 4th place spot on this list. Roger Moore's performance is very consistent, and with a more light-hearted script, he worked well with the material. That being said, some of his finest moments came in the darker aspects of the character, seen in Furious Only, or Parts of Octopussy. Much has been said of his performance in The Man with the Golden Gun, which was a case of poor direction. For some reason, the filmmaker decided Moore should play it like Connery did. Once they realised this wasn't where Moore's strengths were as an actor, his Bond improved with every outing, even if the material wasn't exactly stellar. Much like Connery, Roger Moore defined an era of cinema. Of the first 14 EON films, 7 starred Moore and 6 starred Connery, with one left being Lazenby's one entry. For a long time, Connery and Moore were widely considered to be the definitive on-screen versions of Bond, and there was significant debate as to who was better. I think Roger Moore is very underrated, especially when it comes to the more dramatic aspects of the character. Number 3. For anyone that's seen Casino Royale, Daniel Craig's performance is surely the best thing about it. Cool, calm and collected, Craig gradually becomes Bond over the course of the film. As far as debut performances go, it's the very best in the series, and debut performances are amongst the best in the series anyway. Daniel Craig's performance certainly evolves the most over the course of his Bond era. Skyfall is a superb entry in the series, and we see a more introspective, quiet Bond who is grappling with his place in the world. Thematically, Skyfall isn't exactly subtle, and much of this ties into the 50th anniversary of the series. But how Craig works with this material is great. The 2 standout performances are in Casino Royale and Skyfall. Spectre is a film I've always found a bit tedious, and I previously disliked Craig's performance in Spectre. It's been close to a decade since that film was released, and putting my thoughts on Spectre aside for the time being, I actually rather like Daniel Craig in Spectre. It's the most classic Bond performance of his era, which makes sense in the chronology of the timeline too. Bond is rather talkative in No Time to Die, which many viewers find jarring, as Bond is known for his economic usage of dialogue. I do like Craig in No Time to Die, and I can see where the filmmakers were going, but I do find it slightly strange to see this version of Bond, of all versions, smiling and being sociable. I understand the context given the story and the time elapsed in universe since Bond's spying days. Perhaps more than any other actor since Connery, Craig left his mark on the character, and I think changed the wider public perceptions of Bond and a re-evaluation of the next actor on this list. Number 2. Many videos and articles have been published about Timothy Dalton and how the Craig era is at least partially responsible for this re-evaluation. I think there's a risk that I'm repeating what's been said elsewhere, but Dalton is the most Ian Fleming accurate Bond, and perhaps always will be. Whenever I read an Ian Fleming Bond novel, I picture Dalton's Bond. Ask for perfect Ian Fleming adaptations is silly. Most Bond films have very little bearing plot-wise on the Fleming novels, aside from some references, but just for one Bond at least, it was great that the character was strikingly similar to the one Fleming created. The Living Daylights is a classic Cold War story, and Dalton fits into this aesthetic perfectly. It's quite jarring going from Roger Moore in A View to a Kill to Dalton in this, and that is partly why audiences didn't quite gel with Dalton at the time, but fair play to the producers for making such a clear, distinctive break from what came before, and things only became bolder and more risky with License to Kill. There are many excellent scenes or moments to choose from, just 2 films of Dalton. The series needed to become more invested in the characters and less in the outrageous schemes of some nefarious villain. As I've said, Roger Moore was fantastic, but Dalton came at a time when the series needed a change. The public weren't quite ready for it at the time, but they certainly are now. People often wish Dalton did a 3rd or even a 4th Bond film. I sometimes do too. However, Dalton appeared in 2 films that are amongst the most discussed films in the series nowadays. Dalton didn't need to prove anything with a 3rd. 2 was arguably all that was needed. Number 1. Unless you've been living under a rock or haven't been paying attention to this list, it won't surprise you that Sean Connery is the number 1 Bond actor on this list. While Connery did stop giving a shit about the character after Thunderball, and his relationships with the Broccoli's was complicated to say the least, in those 4 films, Connery is in another category. Even in his first film, Dr. No, Connery is confident and at ease in the part, something other actors took time to do. It's often noted that Connery really slipped easily into the role by the time of Goldfinger, and while his performance in that film is sublime, it's perhaps overlooking how good he is in Dr. No and From Russia with Love. There wasn't really a blueprint to work from. Connery was the first cinematic Bond. Connery was so good that Ian Fleming would later make Bond of Scottish heritage in the novels. Fleming was initially unhappy with Connery being cast, until he saw him action. Sean Connery defined an era of cinema, culture, and fashion. Every subsequent Bond has taken aspects of his performance and tried to make it their own, and the next Bond will also be compared to Connery. His performances did drop off after Thunderball, once Connery stopped giving a shit. However, his initial 4 performances are simply fantastic. There wouldn't be a Bond series if Connery had failed. So that is my Bond actor ranking. What do you think? Let me know your ranking in the comments below, and thanks for watching.